This is the Fantastic Books Podcast,
the fantasy and sci-fi book review podcast for fantasy fanatics, book nerds, and lovers of lore and stories.
covering some of the most loved fantasy series as well as brand new novels.
With your hosts, Anna
And Sam. Let's see what we're reading this week.
Welcome back to another episode of Fantastic Books and How to Read Them. This week we are covering The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, chapters 28 through 32, which we were supposed to do with last week's episode, all as one larger episode, but there was just way too much to talk about, so we're going to tackle the second set of those chapters today. We read those in preparation for the last episode, so we might be a little hazy, but we'll get through it. I'm really excited about these chapters because Kvothe finally leaves Tarbean.
Yes, finally.
And the story, really gets going after this. Although, and I say this every time, but I feel like every chapter, I'm like, oh, yeah, the story's really starting now. And then the next chapter happens, and I'm like, alright, wow, it is really starting now. The action is crazy. And then the next chapter happens, and I'm like, it's still going more and more crazy. It's so good.
Everything has its place and it's all been important, but I think really leaving Tarbean gives Kvothe the opportunity to become who he's meant to be.
Yeah, he finally gets reawoken.
And I don't know, you in a way you kind of need to suffer a little bit in order to gain humility and grow as a person sometimes.
Well, I don't feel like he has that much humility as a character, despite all these really crappy things that have happened to him, but he definitely gets a lot of skills in Tarbean that are super useful for his life later on.
Yeah.
Most important in my mind would just be his ability to explore and find all the secret places in an area and understand that a place isn't just the buildings, but it's also the roofs and the sewers and underneath and above and all the nooks and crannies of it. So it all comes into play.
Yeah.
But we're going to start right now. Oh, I did have an announcement, actually. We announced last week that we have our website up. This week we finally have an Instagram account, which you can access from the website, or you can find us directly on Instagram at Fantastic Books Pod. It's mostly just pictures of pets and books together. So
all the quality content.
I was saying, if that sounds like something that would be pleasant to you, which I don't know why it wouldn't, go follow us over there. Because at the very least, you get to look at pictures of cute pets, which is what everybody wants.
Featuring our cats, Kiki and Zelda.
Alright, now I think we're ready to get into chapter 28, Telu's Watchful Eye. So this chapter opens with Kvothe waking up after he had heard the story about Cinder and kind of connecting all the dots about Cinder. Oh, no, I'm sorry, Lonre and Haliax.
Yes.
Being the same, and then his kind of overwhelming realization that he'd encountered them, and he has some sort of destiny, but doesn't really know what to do.
Yeah, no, he's it's tough because we have this cataclysmic moment where Kvothe's sleeping mind kind of reawakens, and he's like, oh my god, these aren't just stories. The things that happen to me are from legend. Haliax murdered my parents. And
And then he's like, well, what do I do? Do I kill them? Do I find them? How do I find them? I don't even have, 2 coins to rub together. What am I supposed to do?
And I really enjoy the realisticness of his practicality in this moment, because I think in a lot of other fantasy books, it's great, now that my destiny's been outlined, let's go.
Let's just up and leave everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that always bothered me.
But I think it's nice that for the first time, Kvothe has something to live for, and he's back in it. He's back in the game.
Yeah, so he wakes up and right off the bat, the thing he has to live for is another Skarpi story, because he's trying to, I think, his best course of action here is to gather more information.
Yeah.
But he realizes he overslept, so he books it to the half-mast part of the way through a story.
Yeah.
This story is about Selitos, who was the man with special vision, who was the king of Mir Terinial, and the one who Lonre encountered in the last story.
Yeah, very comparable to Denethor.
Yeah, we talked about him last time being really similar to Denethor.
Yeah.
But Unlike Denethor, he doesn't burn his child on a pyre.
Yeah.
He tries to get revenge. So, because we've missed the front of the story, he is in front of Aleph, who I'm assuming is similar to like a high angel or a god. Although I'm a little bit confused because Telu seems like the supreme god, so I'm not sure exactly how Aleph falls in the hierarchy. And then there's this group of people with them called the Ruach. And Selitos is talking about how he needs to get revenge on Lonre. He can't wait for Lonre and his Chandrian to destroy all the other cities.
In short, the story basically tells the beginning of what is to become the Emir.
Right. The Ruach who joined Selitos, and I don't know if the Ruach are a people. I don't know if they're a Fae group. I'm not clear who they are. Hey, editing Anna here. I did a little bit of digging on the Ruach since we had recorded. So the Ruach were the people who inhabited Temerant before the current civilization in which Kvothe lives. But there are some interesting etymological connections to the word. So Ruach is a Hebrew word that also means spirit or wind, and it also shares a word origin with the word ruh, which is an Arabic word that's related to spirits. So, based on this, some people think that the Ademaru are the descendants of the Ruach and therefore would be closely related to the Emir, and that there are several parallels between Kvothe being the embodied spirit of Telu, like there was Menda, the embodied spirit of Telu, and his ability to call the name of the wind, or in Telu's case, call the name of the Ruach who became the Emir. Whoever some of them are joined Selitos, so there's Kiriel, Dea, Endless, Gesa, Lekelte, Imit, and Ordal. Oh, Andon was the last one. And they decide to join Selitos in fighting the Chandrian. And Aleph touches them and gives them wings. So some have wings of fire and shadow, some have wings of iron and glass, and some have wings of stone and blood. And then he speaks their true names, and they're ringed in a white fire. So it's very angelic in my mind.
And like a rebirth.
Yeah. And they have the ability to go where they wish. In my mind, this is the start of the Emir, the group that's sworn to fight the Chandrian. I don't know if the beginnings of the Emir were these more mythical creatures, and then they have human followers, or if these creatures have died out, and then the modern Emir are just humans.
And during Skarpi's story, he even mentions like a parallel that Telhu is kind of gives them his blessing to kind of go forth and like fight for the greater good. And the story kind of gets cut out by
some Tellan priests of all people.
Yeah, Tellan priests and a justice. And these guys are just like the classic like corrupt priests that abuse their power and just run amok in Tarbean. Yeah. So they cut Skarpi's story off,
They're a type of character that's found really quite frequently in fantasy, I feel like.
Yeah, they just suck.
They interrupt, which is like the one rule that Skarpi has, is you can't speak while he's speaking. So immediately everyone's kind of shook, and all of the kids run out except for Kvothe.
And like two other
and like a couple of
kids who are like dumbstruck.
Yeah.
And they're just like, what?
I know, like, what's happening? Who interrupted?
And so this part's actually kind of cool because it's like a Tellan priest and a justice. So this guy really has a lot of authority.
Is he a priest and a justice, or is it two separate guys?
Two separate. One's a justice and one's a priest.
I thought the justice was also through the church, but maybe I just misunderstood.
It might be just a different like layer in the hierarchy.
Oh, he could be, yeah.
But he basically is now accusing Skarpi of heresy, and
which I don't understand. Skarpi is literally telling a story about the allies of Telu and how they do... His last sentence is, they mete out justice to the world, and Telu is the greatest of them all, and that's where they're like, I've heard enough. You're saying too much. So I don't know if the heresy is that, like, there's creatures that are supposed to be equal to Telu, and they don't believe in that, or if they just want to be in control of all of the information about Telu and just kind of shut him down, but it's very, like, fake crime.
Yeah.
It just makes me mad.
No, and it's funny because from what I kind of understand of this scene when I've read it, is literally that there can only be one brand of the story of Telu and God, and it's the churches, and anything else is heresy.
No good. Okay.
And it's because people can recount stories, but only the church can do that in their word, in their book.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So we get these finks that are kind of running amok at the masthead, giving Skarpi a hard time.
I know, and the poor barkeep is, like, trying to be... Totally gets cowed over. He's like, can I give you a drink? And then the guy's kind of a jerk, and he's like, we've taken vows against a drink. Like, we don't want that, but we'll take the money instead.
Yeah, but there's also really, like, intense comment about it, too. Let me see...
where he says some of our brothers have taken vows against the temptations of the flesh.
Yeah, and it's like by drinking they could basically be tempted to act upon their desires.
I think temptations of the flesh are also like gluttony and anything bodily, really.
Oh, okay. I don't know if it was like a snide jab of like priests doing terrible things to children or like that kind of deal.
Ooh! Considering it's the priest saying it, I am gonna guess no.
Okay.
But
definitely a misinterpretation then.
So after he says that, Kvothe catches Skarpi's eye. He gives him a little, like, half smile and a nod. And it's funny because Kvothe seems really concerned for him, and Skarpi's not particularly concerned for himself.
No, Skarpi actually isn't even fazed by the fact that this guy is a justice, and he kind of calls the justice and the priest out for being corrupt.
Yeah, he's like, fine churchmen such as yourselves could find better things to do than arresting storytellers and extorting money from honest men. He's pushing it right back onto these two.
Yeah. It's kind of intense, because no one else would have, like, the backbone to do this.
But then, some crazy stuff happens. Skarpi has been hit. The justice, because he hit him, and the priest have come to the point where they're, like, freaking out and losing control of the situation, which is why they hit him. And then Skarpi knows the man's name. He says, "Come now, heirless." The justice goes really pale and looks very kind of concerned or whatever.
He also says,
he has friends high up in the church.
Yeah, and he also immediately says, "It's not as if I expect you to be bound off looking for Haliax in the Seven yourself. Small deeds for small men. I imagine the trouble's in finding a job small enough for men such as yourselves."
He's being really snarky.
Oh, yeah. He's like, "You could pick trash or check the brothel beds for lice while you're visiting."
He's just, like, thinks these guys are small potatoes.
Yeah, which means he must know the system pretty well if he knows that these people really don't have a lot of authority.
Well, here's the crazy part. So the last sentence that Skarpi says is, "You should run Kvothe." So already a big red flag that he knows Kvothe's name. And then he says, "I have friends in the church who can help me." So my theory is that Skarpi is a member of the Emir, like high up in the church, and is sworn to secrecy. And the Emir know who Kvothe is. And I picked a lot of this up from fan theories that I've read. But the theory is that Skarpi, Ben, and the man who came with Kvothe's troop when he was younger, who taught him all about the plants.
Oh.
His name started with an L. Anyway, that all three of those people were Emir and were sent to meet Kvothe and kind of put him on a path and give him the knowledge that he needs.
That's wicked cool.
And I feel like because Skarpi also mentions that he has friends in the church who can help him, it means he's very powerful within the church. Like, he's not concerned about the situation at all. The fact that he knows Kvothe's name is bizarre to me. Like, I have no idea where he would know it from.
Yeah.
Unless he had
sought
out Kvothe and knew exactly who he was.
Or it was just a powerful neighbor somehow.
Maybe, but I think even with naming, you don't know someone's, like, regular
Given
name.
name, yeah.
Yeah, you know their, like, soul name. So I'm not really sure. But that is the theory that I read up on most recently, and I thought that was really fascinating. And we know that Skarpi makes it out of this because in the beginning, Chronicler said he was going to meet Skarpi. So clearly Skarpi does know someone high up in the church and was able to get out of this situation.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's the last we see of him, which is a bummer, because I really like his character. Just the description of him is kind of like a weathered sea man with really brilliant blue eyes, just surrounded by, like, this swarm of children hanging out at a bar all day. I don't know why, I think is really great. And his stories are obviously very instrumental in moving the plot forward, so it's a bummer that he is only in the book for a few chapters.
Yeah.
But that brings us to chapter 29, The Doors of My Mind. This chapter is very short, and this is kind of where... Remember when Kvothe, his family first died, he talked about going through, like, the stages in your mind, like the doors of sleep, the doors of forgetfulness. So I think this chapter is named The Doors of My Mind because all his doors finally reopen and he's ready to, like, take on his destiny and change his life and accept a lot of facts as truth now that he's kind of reconciled them.
And it's great, like, everything kind of floods past him, like, not just memories of, like, what the Chandra did to his family, but... you know, his experiences in life itself. He then thinks about his music, and he's like, has it really been all these years since I've held a lute, since I've played my music?
I know.
And he's just so ready to, like, get out of this dump and, like, start living his life again.
Yeah, and he said he finds the memories less bitter than before, so, like, all of these things that he'd cut out of his life because they just reminded him of his old life, he, like, accepts all of them all at once. And it's really emotional, like, he cries, it just says, like, his mind is, like, feels like it's stretched and awoken, and he's, like, ready to take on his destiny. But then he's like, I'm 15, what can I do?
Yeah, it's kind of a humbling moment.
Like we've been saying, it's very realistic how he approaches this problem, but he does remember that Haliax had said to Cinder, who keeps you safe? So he puts two and two together and realizes the Chandrian have enemies, so he needs to figure out who the enemies are. Who the enemies of the Chandrian are, which is when he mentions the Emir, but he doesn't know where to find them.
He then remembers, though, that, you know, the Bent wanted him to attend the university, and that they have 10,000 upon thousands of books, where if he gets admitted to the university, he can get that information.
Yeah, so he says
it's
there's
finally
really only one place left for him to go.
Yeah.
He gathers up his few possessions. He's got 27 coins, a sack, a rag blanket, a half a pint bottle with a cork in it full of water, a piece of canvas sailcloth, a pair of dice, one shoe, and the book Rhetoric and Logic from Ben. And I think it's great that he's been able to keep it safe for so long and just tucked away when he was finally ready for it.
Yeah.
And it's great, he holds it up to his face and it's got the smell of Ben's wagon, like, it feels like the last piece of his past, and then he just reads the inscription Ben wrote in it, which was, Kvothe, defend yourself well at the university, make me proud, remember your father's song, which is why I think Ben may also be an Emir, because that song is really, really important.
That's a good point. I never considered that.
Why else would he bring it up? Be wary of folly, your friend Abinthy. And that's the end of chapter 29.
Chapter 30, The Broken Binding.
I love this chapter.
It's so good. So, we have Kvothe going over to this bookstore, and he approaches the counter carrying Rhetoric and Logic, and he basically is asking to pawn the book.
This isn't a pawn shop, right?
No, it's a bookstore. And so, Kvothe, starts interacting with the shopkeeper, and he's asking him how much he can get for the book. And the guy just straight up is, like, snubbed.
Yeah, a couple of jots, which is, like, 2 pennies.
Yeah, and he looks at Kvothe because, at this time, Kavothe's still, like, a dirty-looking street urchin. The guy assumes that he just stole the book and that he's illiterate, so he's like...
Well, he probably hasn't bathed in, 3 years? His hair has grown in. Later, he mentions he's wearing a burlap sack for a shirt. So, I'm sure he looks real good.
Yeah, he's a little just straight up, like, street urchin mode.
He's a good bargainer, though.
Oh, yeah, he's great. the shopkeeper lowballs him, and Kvothe says it's worth at least 2 talents, and he wants the option to buy it back for a month. And so the shopkeeper kind of laughs and said it's not a pawn shop, and slides the book back towards Kvothe. Kvothe then says, how about 20 days? So the shopkeeper, takes a pause. He does look through the book, because he does recognize it as, like, a well-written and good book to own. And he pulls out the talents to give to Kvothe. Everything Kvothe's instincts were telling him is, just grab the money. And he kind of has to, step back and use his head finally, now that he's kind of out of, survival mode of living.
Yeah, because he's just been, scrounging for years at this point.
Yeah, and so he says to the shopkeeper that he'll need a receipt.
And then the shopkeeper gives him a fake receipt.
Oh, yeah, it was great. He, death glares at Kvothe, and then basically writes on there, by signing here, I attest to the fact I can't neither read nor write. And so, Kvothe, just being a smart aleck.
Just a precocious kid. Yeah, more of a smart aleck, I guess. Kind of cocky.
Yeah, just totally owns this guy. It's great. He puts DD as if they were initials.
Designated driver.
Designated dickhead. And so...
Good thing the guy asked what D stands for,
Oh, yeah.
Because if he just, took the slip immediately, that would have been it.
Yeah, goodbye.
Wait, come back.
Kvothe does answer. He says the D stands for defeasance. It means to render something null and void, usually a contract. The second D is for decrepitate? Yeah?
Can you neither read nor write?
I guess not, so no receipt for me. Decrepitation? I can't even pronounce.
Decrepit.
Oh, thank you. And decrepitation is a punishment for forgery in Junpui, which is false receipts would fall in that category. So he's just being, like a smartass. He made no move to take the money. He just kind of stared at the shopkeeper, and
I like that the guy's just only response is, "This isn't Junpui."
Yeah, not even oh, you actually are capable and pretty intelligent.
He gives it to him. He laughs and says, "You've convinced me." So then he gets the proper receipt.
Yeah,
which is nice because he actually lets Kvothe write it, and then Kvothe totally takes advantage of him too.
Doesn't he end up being able to buy it back for a little bit less?
Yeah. He wrote, that's alright. So, the man sold it to him for 2 talents, and then Kvothe wrote on his receipt that he would be able to buy it back for 2 pennies. I don't know how much a talent is. I assumed a talent is probably equivalent to a $100 bill. Any guesses on your part?
It's hard to say because, these are currencies that are completely different from anything that's close to American currency.
I know, but how much does a talent buy?
Well, a talent...
Because at the university, sometimes their admission is 6 talents, which doesn't seem...
I think it's a lot.
That
it's
much? But then how is this book 2
there's
talents?
copper penny, there's jots to pennies.
And shims.
The way I think of it is jots are the equivalent of quarters.
Okay.
And the pennies are dollars. Talents would be 20s.
I feel like they've got to be more than 20s.
Maybe.
Right?
They're clearly a high value.
Maybe 50s?
Maybe.
$50?
Yeah, I mean, for a really good book.
That seems reasonable.
I'd have to see. Maybe they have a whole page on currency.
They probably do. We should probably cover it at some point. Hey, we are going to cover it at some point, and that point is right now. Editing Anna here, and after that little conversation, I did a little bit of research on the different currencies of Kvothe's world. What I realized is that there are 3 different systems of currencies, which is what Sam and I hadn't originally realized in our discussion there. So there's Kialdish currency, and those are the Shim, Drab, Jot, Talent, and Mark. And those are cast of metal, and the metal that they are made of is what they're worth. There's the currency of the Commonwealth, which is where Kvothe currently is, and those are the Iron Penny, Hay Penny, or Half Penny, Copper Penny, Silver Penny, and the Common. And most of this money is not accepted outside of the Commonwealth. So once Kvothe leaves Tarbean, we don't see some of those types of monies again. And then there is the currency of Vintus, which has its own separate currency, and this is what's used in the Waystone Inn. So these are the halfpenny, penny, which are both made of copper, bit, quarter bit, round, halved, noble, which are all made of silver, and the real, royal, and 5 real piece, which are all made of gold. So there's several different systems. And just for some clarification, someone once asked Patrick Rothfuss at a book signing how much a silver talent was worth in his mind, and he responded that it was worth about $1,000, which seems like a lot, obviously. Like, that book should be not $2,000. But later on, when Kvothe buys a full set of clothing, if you think about how much it costs to have a suit tailored to you, it would run you about $1,000. So that makes sense. I think it's kind of iffy, but that gives you a little bit more clarification. Either way, what it comes down to is Kvothe agrees to trade his book for some mad money, as you put it, and then also be able to buy it back for pennies, but he says it doesn't matter because even at the end of the 2 span, he's not going to have enough money to buy the book back. He hopefully won't be in Tarbean, so it's kind of a loss. Like, he has to trade the book away knowing he's most likely not going to get it back, which sucks.
Though I love in, like, classic Kvothe fashion, though, he's, like, all satisfied. He's like, I almost feel bad for the fact that I just stole a bunch of his pens and ink when he wasn't looking.
I know, but then the only reason he doesn't give them back is because there's no convenient way to, like, put them back without being noticed.
Yeah, so just awesome.
I know, he's got slick fingers at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, we talked about all those skills he picked up in Tarbean. Pickpocketing and, like, sleight of hand is definitely super important for, like, his character abilities later on. Did you have anything else left to say about the broken binding?
No.
I just like how cheeky he is.
Yeah, he's back to being, like, his true self.
Yeah, I think this was finally the last. Like, his mind is fully awake. Chapter 31. The Nature of Nobility.
And what a chapter it is.
I love this chapter. I say that about every chapter, but I really appreciate the fact that one of the first things he does is, well, he buys a purse to keep his money in, but he goes to get a real breakfast. And there's, so I used to go hiking a lot, like backpacking trips that were multiple days with my friends, and the thing we would always do when we finally, like, finished our backpacking trek and came out of the mountains was to stop at a diner and get a full, huge, hot breakfast. And it was always so sad. It was always so satisfying. Like, it'd be like pancakes, omelets, hot chocolate, French toast, like hash browns, fries, like everything. And some people would just be like, give me 3 hamburgers for breakfast. Like, it was always just like a feast, and it was so good. So I appreciate the eggs and ham and bread with honey and milk.
I know, just like the perfect, like, out of poverty, like, breakfast of champions moment.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he says it costs 5 iron pennies, so I guess a penny's probably about $1 if you think about what, like, a diner breakfast would cost.
Yeah.
Or how much those things would cost if you bought them at the store. But yeah, just, like, such a successful breakfast moment.
Successful breakfast.
I liked it. He did say it felt really strange eating at a table with, like, people around him and being waited on. So he's definitely still out of practice being part of society again. Like, he's not on the edges of society anymore. He feels weird.
Yeah.
Like, kind of reintegrating himself. Oh, here's where he talks about what he's been wearing. His shirt is an old burlap sack, and his pants are made out of canvas and very, very large. They smell of smoke, grease, and stagnant alley water, and they were held up with the length of rope. He has no shoes.
The finest fashion.
I know, right? Looking real good. So he has a mini predicament of if he should buy clothes or try to find a bath first, because if he bathes, he has to put his stinky clothes on. And that's how he comes to this very clever scheme of his.
Well, first the bath.
Right, so that's what he decides. He's going to go bath first. And he actually just asks at the inn that he's currently at if he can have a bath, and they trade him a bath for a couple hours of work. So he offers to clean the hearth and then do the dishes later. And he does that. He scrubs himself down.
Oh, this dude is just rejuvenated. This is like 3 years worth of, like, grind cake to him.
I know. But it's cool. This is the first time he looks at himself in the mirror. So this is actually kind of the first time we get a description of what he looks like as a character now that he's aged into teenagehood.
Yeah, adolescence.
Thanks. He's talking from his own perspective, but he thinks he looks like some noble's son. So he's got lean and fair face. His hair is shoulder length and straight, and we know that it's that bright red color. So that's kind of what we can imagine Kvothe looking like. And here we have it, the best part.
Oh yeah, this part's absolutely awesome. So, all his years of stage training kind of just prepare him for this whole montage, and it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So Kvothe is literally just walking the streets of Tarbean in a towel, just like stone-faced and angry, and he approaches father and son, and he just snaps at them, demanding where he can find some decent clothes.
And he like insults them too. Like he like looks directly at the guy's shirt and he goes, "Clothes," and then looks at it and goes, "I mean decent clothes." Yeah,
not even just like anything at this point, please. And he goes, "Is that the only place about?" And the guy's like, "Well, there's..." And Kvothe literally just like waves this guy to silence, and he goes, "Just point while you still have your wits about you." Just like,
I know, he's
brat.
really just like embodied this character who he's basing off of Dunsty, an insufferably petulant little boy with an important father who was one of the parts he used to play in the troupe. I think the fact that he's not only using his stage training, but remembering fondly parts of his past truly shows that, like, he's back.
A boy's back. So he makes his way over to this place called Bentley's where he's going to be trying to get some clothes, and just so dramatic, throws the doors open and just storms in.
Immediately, "Fetch me a robe."
You lack wit.
And then the classic line from The Office, "Did I stutter?"
Have you lost your mind?
I know, that's what I always think of. Yeah, and he plays the classic, "Do you have any idea who I am?" card. Which, having worked in retail, is like...
I know, ugh.
Horrible.
So, like, just literally all the Karens.
I love the passage where he describes the situation, saying that noble sons are one of the great destructive forces of nature, like floods or tornadoes, so the best thing to do when one happens to you is just grin and bear it and minimize the damage by, like, agreeing and doing everything the noble wants, and then hoping for the best, really.
Yeah.
Poor old Bentley is, like, running around trying to help Kvothe and sewing as fast as possible to make him an outfit, because he's sitting there with no clothes on, being a big jerk.
Literally. And then just, like, fully playing to the role, he's like, "Well, you might as well ask what's happening. Like, what happened? I know you're dying of curiosity."
I know, he really lays it on thick.
And the guy just like, "Sure, what happened?"
Like, if you want to say so.
Kvothe really just kind of plays the part well. He's basically saying how a prostitute stole his clothes.
And then demanded all his money.
Yeah. Or what's the stupid line? He says, "A gentleman is never far from his purse."
I know, what a brat.
Just so dumb. So,
it's funny though, because he says he makes the men miserable, but tried to give him that story so that it was at least something to tell his friends. Like, oh, how thoughtful.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, so basically he says he did not give in to the prostitute's demands, and that's how he ended up at poor old Bentley's.
Naked as the day he was born. After about, half an hour to an hour of him being, insufferable and complaining and questioning the quality of fabrics.
Like, hemming and hawing and tapping his foot, finally gets an outfit and then says, "Well, get me home, I suppose."
Yeah. And so this part's great because Kvothe says all just such a brat. He's like, "How much for your trouble, Bentley?" And so Bentley then says, 1 talent and 2. Kvothe, starts lacing up his shirt, doesn't say anything, slowly starts to gather his money, and then literally Bentley goes, "Sorry, sir, I forgot who I was dealing with. 1 even would do nicely."
That's the crappy thing, though. It's like, clearly if you're a noble, you have more than enough money to pay in full price, but you scare people so much that they, like, give you a deal, which is...
Which actually really worked out for Kvothe.
Yeah, it did work out for him, because he has hardly anything, but just kind of sad about the ways of the world.
Exactly.
But he goes back to the inn where he took his bath. The innkeeper doesn't recognize him, which has got to be a really nice feeling to finally be, like, so clean that you look like a completely different person.
Yeah.
But he returns the towel and offers to do the dishes, which is actually very sweet. But ends up just paying for his bath and collects the items that he left behind. So, it's the pens and ink that he stole and the receipt from the bookstore.
That's it.
And he actually mentions at this point, it's kind of an aside statement, but he mentions how much a tavern is like a comforting place and how one day he'd like to own a tavern as fine as this one. And we do see that he ends up owning one.
Yeah.
The Waystone Inn. So it's nice to see that he does get his wish, but I think unfortunately the Waystone is not really where he wants to be.
Yeah, he doesn't have it in the way that you'd think he'd want to have it.
Yeah, I think he's been forced there.
And that's kind of a lot with all the things that kind of are predicted within the story, which is really cool. On the back of the book, where they have like the whole story of Kvothe and like how he's stolen princesses back from Sleeping Barrel Kings and that whole aside, everything that's listed that we do know about, it's worded in a way in which what actually happens from what it's like listed, how it happens, are two completely different ways. Yeah. So it's really interesting that even with the Waystone Inn and everything else, it's not how you'd imagine.
Yeah, it's not like a happy ending.
Yeah.
Of like a place to retire to.
Exactly.
I think that's what a lot of the whole book is supposed to be, though, because Chronicler did at the beginning say, there's all these myths around you, like, I'd like to set the record straight, and so in Kvothe narrating his story, which is the book, we get the, like, truth of it, which is why on the back the paragraph describing Kvothe is very much based on the myth part of it.
Yeah.
And it does give you a lot of foreshadowing about what happens to him, because he mentions specific events, which is kind of cool. Yeah, he says, I'd count myself lucky to have an inn as nice as this one when I've grown up.
And then he kind of makes a declaration that he's going to be heading towards the university.
Yep. And asks the best place to find a caravan leaving for the north. Chapter 32. Coppers, Cobblers, and Crowds. This is the last chapter we'll be covering.
No, this chapter is great. So, Kvothe is heading towards Hillside.
Which is where, the last time he went there is when he got beat up around Christmas time, right? Or not Christmas, whatever. Midwinter.
The pageant.
The pageant.
And so as he's walking, he has this weird growing suspicion and like alertness in the back of his head. He's getting like really anxious and creeped out. And he's like looking around his shoulder and he's kind of getting skeeved out. And so he runs into a back alley and like catches his breath. He thinks he's being followed or pursued, but it ends up not.
Right.
And so he kind of sidesteps into an alley a few more times so he realizes that this is the first time he's been part of a crowd before. Like, he's used crowds as, like, a cover for when he's, like, sneaking around, like, pickpocketing, or he's walked through crowds, or...
Well, that's, like, what I was saying when he was eating the breakfast, was that it felt so strange to be, like, seated among other people eating and not eating by yourself, and having the time to actually sit down for a meal and not be worried about, like, other people following you or trying to steal what you have. So he definitely has crossed this kind of invisible social barrier between, like, being a part of society in the city and being on the outskirts of it. And it's, I don't know, it's just really interesting that he feels like he's still being watched or being followed, and he still has his hackles raised and is very nervous about things. But because he has this feeling, he ends up ducking through a door and walking into a shoe shop.
And this part's just wonderful.
I know, it really warms my heart.
And so, when he walks into the shoe shop, he's, like, kind of greeted by this old man. And it's, like, really just pleasant when he's like, let me guess, you need shoes.
I know.
And Kvothe just looks down, and his feet are now clean, but since he's been walking around all day, they're just dusty.
Well, they're also thick and callous because he hasn't had shoes in
over 3 years.
Like, at least 2 years.
And so many previous chapters about him, like, dreaming of shoes.
Oh, I know. Especially, I always have cold feet, so, like, not having shoes in the winter would be my worst nightmare.
Oh my god, it'd be horrible.
I'd probably get frostbite.
This shopkeeper it's almost like a Goldilocks, like, moment. He's like, how about these shoes? And, like, too tight. How about these shoes?
I thought he did that so that Kvothe wouldn't feel bad just asking for the cheapest pair of shoes.
I think it's
like,
a combination
he's like, let me
of the
put on
two.
these fancy shoes. No, those are too tight. He tries to give him, like, a nice treatment, even though he knows this kid has, like, no money and probably just needs, like, your cheapest, most accessible pair of shoes. But
he definitely spares his dignity.
Yeah, he really, like, pulls a solid. The fanciest, like, purple velvet ones.
Yeah.
Like, he pulls them out and he's like, how about these? No, they wear out way too fast. I know that would be no good for you.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just really nice that he's not like, here's, like, a cheapest, lowest quality shoe.
Yeah.
Here you go.
And then, literally, this is, like, the line. Oh, I love it. He's like, you can tell a lot about a person by their feet. Some men come near smiling, laughing, shoes all clean and brushed, socks all powdered up. But when those shoes are off, their feet smell just fearsome. Those are the people that hide things. They've got a bad-smelling secret, and they try and hide them, just like they try and hide their feet. It never works, though. Only to stop your feet from smelling is let them air out a bit. Could be the same thing with secrets. I don't know about that, though. I just know about shoes.
I don't know. I feel like this guy has some kind of secret power.
Yeah, seriously.
Like, I don't know who he is, but I want his backstory.
But then he goes, now you have old souls for a boy so young. Scars, calluses. Feet like these you could run barefoot all day on stone and not need shoes. A boy your age only gets these feet one way.
That guy's so courteous, though, like, about the whole situation.
Yeah, it's so pure. And so he goes on and he's like, these pair are brand new, and they cost a talent too.
Which I don't think Kvothe has enough money left for that at this point.
No. And then he pointed out another pair of shoes that were a little bit more worn in, and he goes, now these shoes, on the other hand, are used, and I don't sell used shoes, which was totally just, like, him giving him, like, a freebie. It was like...
Yeah, it's complete, like, here's a free pair of shoes, but without saying, take my charity.
Yeah.
I don't need your charity.
Yeah, I don't need your charity. But
and then he's, like, even so nice to just, like, give Kvothe, like, a moment of privacy to, like, put his shoes on and, like, walk out without feeling pressured or anything. And I'm really glad that Kvothe leaves a couple of coins on his way out just to, like, pay kindness forward.
Yeah, and I just love the line. It's like, why? Because pride is a strange thing, and because generosity deserves generosity in return. But mostly because it felt like the right thing to do, and that's reason enough.
That little scene in the shoe shop is one of my favorites in the whole book, just because of how long Kvothe has suffered and been really, really prideful. And I'm sure he could have gotten, like, handouts and charity if he tried, and he did. Like, he has Trapis, and he begs, but it's never, like, a humane moment. And this guy, like, really looks at him and feels pity, and then, like, really, really helps him out in a way that's not pushing charity on him.
Right.
It feels like a very real situation.
Yeah, no, it's very wholesome.
But then we jump ahead a little bit, and Kvothe is now in the square where all the Wagoneers are, and he's trying to catch a ride north to the university town. Yeah,
he meets a man named Rowan, and this guy is just like a classic...
Very gruff.
Yeah,
very
just
rough
like
around
stern.
the edges. Like, you can ride in the wagon if there's space, or you can sleep underneath it. Lunch is just bread. If the wagon gets stuck, you push.
Yeah, like, you behave or you get left behind. All that stuff. And so Kvothe's just willing to do whatever it takes to kind of get going, get out of Tarbean. He then, really cool moment, speaks to Rowan and Siru and thanks him for allowing him to be close to his family. And just, like, immediately, like, respect values. Like,
I don't even know where Kvothe learned that phrase, but it must have been, like, deep, deep in his brain.
Yeah, maybe one of the plays, or, like, from Ben or something.
I don't know, but it was definitely really cool.
Kvothe makes one last stop before he departs Tarbean, and this... it's just so emotional. It's great. He heads towards Trapis's basement for one more time. But
it's crazy. I was saying, as he's entering, that kid tries to pickpocket him.
And he, like, without even thinking twice, just, like, nonchalantly, like, slaps behind his leg and, like, whacks the kid's hand back.
And he's jostled because he thinks, we don't steal from each other here. Trappis's basement is...
It's, like, sacred.
The sacred ground for us, like, lost boys. And then he remembers that he doesn't look like one of them anymore. So.
Yeah, they don't realize it's him. He makes his way into Trappis's basement, and Trapis is just helping all the other troubled kids and tending to them. And he's not really looking up from what he's doing, and just kind of calling to the other kids, giving them instructions to help, like, some of the other kids.
Yeah, he's just doing, like giving the handouts and stuff. But then, like, without even skipping a beat, assigns Kvothe
like a task to do.
And doesn't question his change in appearance, doesn't not recognize him the way other people did. And it's just really sweet, because there's a line where he says, Trapis never saw the clothes, only the child inside them.
Ugh, that's pure.
I know. So Trapis is just, like, a good soul, and always sees the faces, the souls inside these, like, kids who are passed over by every other part of society, and he's just really proud of Kvothe for making it out and gives him a hug.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Kvothe tells Trapis about the place where he used to live under, like, the 3 roofs.
Oh, yeah, and tells him to go get the supplies he had there, but it's really, like
it could
very
be a home for someone
honorable of
else.
him to do that.
And it's also kind of a closure thing, too, like, he'll never need that again, so he's giving it up for someone else.
Oh, so true. So true.
And a really great part, Trapis says, I'm always glad to see one of you get away. I know you'll do just fine for yourself, but you can always come back if you need to. And you're just like,
oh, like a single tear.
Like, nothing.
But it's so good. And that is Kvothe's great escape from Tarbean. And next chapter, we will follow him as he travels away from the city and gets to the university, which is, and it feels like an entirely new plot part of the way through the book. So it's really exciting. There's new characters, there's new locations, all sorts of new everything as he's trying to start at the university and learn all of his schooling stuff, but also side research the Chandrian and then make friends and survive on his own.
Yes.
So, thank you very much for listening, and until next time,
stay happy and healthy, and happy reading!
This podcast was recorded by Anna Opushinsky and Sam Furman, edited by Anna Opushinsky, produced by Anna Opushinsky and Sam Furman, with webpage and artwork designed by Anna Opushinsky. Thanks, listeners. If you're looking for more, check us out at fantasticbookspod.com, where we have book reviews, reading list suggestions, merch, and you can even send us a message.
Or find us on Facebook and Instagram at Fantastic Books Pod.
And if you like what you've been hearing, don't forget to leave us a review.
Thanks.
Goldenrise Media.